Hi, this is Steve Daugherty, attorney and CEO of Montana Elder Law. And the purpose of this video is I want to talk to you about what most people seem most stressed about, and that's losing their home and life savings to nursing home costs. That represents our single greatest financial threat as Americans. It's some kind of catastrophic illness, whether that's a car wreck or a stroke, where we have to go into a nursing home for multiple years. Even in-home costs can be catastrophic. In Montana, the average cost for a nursing home is $7,500 a month in 2017. $7,500 a month comes to $90,000 a year, and you got to pay that with after-tax dollars. So the real number might be closer to $120,000. It's only going to keep going up. Assisted living costs average $4,500 a month, and in-home care kind of varies. But there's good news that we can provide some protection through a family asset protection trust, where we may take some of your assets, typically a home, maybe some other real estate, or perhaps some liquid assets that you have no intent of spending in the near future. Regardless, it's a case-by-case approach. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and so through our consultation, we'll identify to you what we think are prudent assets to put into such a trust. And the idea is if we put these assets in this trust, after 5 years, they're unavailable. They're unavailable in terms of applying to Medicaid. Medicaid will pay for your long-term care costs, nursing home costs, once an individual has less than $2,000 of countable assets. Now, I didn't say total assets, did I? I said countable assets. So what we do as elder lawyers is we take countable assets and we convert them into non-countable assets. Why? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a floor for the most that you could lose in the event that the unthinkable happens, right? So we're creating a plan that I hope you never need. But what a lot of people say is, hey, if I could just get the kids the house, I'd feel really good. That was more than I got, right? So we're not going to put all of your assets into a family asset protection trust. And when I talk to clients about asset protection, it's really a continuum. And I want you to look at this graphic. On the left side of the screen this is if you had assets. Over here is there's 0% protection, but you have 100% control. So this is like cash money in your pocket, right? On the opposite end of the spectrum, on the right side of your screen, is where you have 100% protection of your assets, but you have 0% control. And so far too many people think of it as an all or nothing approach, and I don't. Like most things in life, moderation is best. So what I want my clients is to be somewhere in the middle, and it just depends on the type of assets you have, what you're allocating. If you're mostly real estate, we may end up protecting more, but these are the key issues that we're going to discuss at our meeting, and we're going to try to figure out what's the most that we can protect without interfering your life at all. I don't want you to have money over there that you need or that you can't get to. Now, the good news is if you need to get that into that trust, we can get the money back out and to you, and we'll discuss that at the meeting, the details and the mechanics of how that works. But just in general, just remember that one size does not fit all. We want to take a look at it, and whatever we put into this trust, after 5 years, those assets within the trust are non-countable in terms of a Medicaid application. And this is important because when we're applying for Medicaid, we have to, in order to qualify, we have to have less than $2,000 of countable assets. I didn't say total assets, and our job is to try to convert some, if not all. Well, we typically don't want to do all unless we've already had a crisis situation, but we want to take some of the assets that are currently countable, put them into this trust so they become non-countable, and then if you do have that medical crisis, whatever we've put in this trust will eventually go to your family or your heirs. And once you have spent what's outside of the trust, then we can qualify and apply you for Medicaid. I've mentioned Medicaid a lot. I need to dispel some myths because there's a lot of bad information out there. 65% of nursing home patients in America pay with Medicaid. Okay? When we think of Medicaid, we often think of some scary place on the edge of town where the people inside get mistreated, and that is just no longer the case. It may have been true at some point, but the fact is that 65% of people in a nursing home are on Medicaid. Almost absolutely, every facility in town is going to have some Medicaid patients. And the statistics tell us that 2 out of every 3 are going to be on Medicaid. Now, when we think of Medicaid recipients, we think of the homeless, the indigent, but the fact is the people that are poverty stricken, the homeless and the indigent, their health levels are pretty poor to begin with. So if they're stricken with a stroke or some catastrophic illness, they typically don't live that long. So the 65% of the people we're talking about are people like you and I who went in as a private payer, and after 2 or 3 years, they ran out of money. And then they had to apply for Medicaid. And so the only people actually at the nursing homes who know who are paying with Medicaid versus private pay are the people in the accounting office up front. So the people who are coming into the room and providing care, they don't know. Why? Because in May, perhaps the patient was paying privately, and in June, perhaps they're paying publicly. So I want to dispel the myths of Medicaid. It's a completely different system than what it once was, and there's no reason to fear it. So what we're trying to do is create a plan for you. We're not trying to give you a poverty sentence. We're just creating a plan to put in place that we hope that you'll never need. Ladies and gentlemen, you've paid into the system for years. Don't be afraid to use it as an emergency backup, okay? And so the Family Asset Protection Plan is just a way to say, all right, in the event that this catastrophe hits me, at least I'm going to shelter some assets so I don't go completely broke. So usually by this point, people are saying, Steve, this sounds a little too good to be true. You're promising that you can protect my assets and provide me with all of the care I'll ever need in that event. And well, there are rules that we have to work within, right? So there's very few attorneys in the state of Montana who are doing this because it's a very, very narrow niche of the law, and you need to see a specialist, not a general practitioner in this situation. It's just like you don't want to hire me to provide a DNA defense to a murder rap. So you want a very specialized attorney who knows the Medicaid laws very intricately. And so we have all these exceptions. But the big one that we're all pretty familiar with is the 5-year look-back period. Now, what is that? Medicaid says, all right, attorneys, you guys can go out and do your sophisticated estate planning, but you cannot set up a desk at the front door of the nursing home, and as people come walking in, you take all of their assets, take them out of their name, and put them into this trust, and then they walk into the nursing home and say, hey, where does the poor people apply? That's called fraud. So what instead they say is, any gift that you have made, that you have taken out of your name over the last 5 years, we're going to assume that you did that for the sole purposes of qualifying for Medicaid. But hey, if it's been 60 months or more, we know you don't have a crystal ball, and that we assume that you did this for charitable or estate planning purposes. So that's how we came up with the 60-month rule. Why 60 months? I do not know. It's what we have to work with. So when we set up this plan, if you came in today, we put the assets into the trust, and it begins a 5-year clock ticking. So the sooner that we do this, the better, right? And then after 60 months, whatever we have put into this trust is no longer a countable asset. Okay, so at that point, whatever is outside the trust is all that we have to spend in order to qualify for Medicaid. You run out of if you live long enough that you run out of the other assets, well, then we'll apply for Medicaid and they'll pick up your long-term care. But that's the 5-year rule, and that's how it works. Now, a couple of things. The way that this works is because it is an irrevocable trust and you cannot serve as the trustee. So and the idea being is if you can control the asset, you're not going to qualify for Medicaid. They're going to say, pick up your pen and write a check to the nursing home. So we have to work with the laws that we're given, and so the law says that we can put it in this trust, but you're going to have someone else that is controlling the trust. This is different from a revocable living trust. A revocable living trust has no protection for you. A revocable living trust is designed to protect your heirs, not you. So this irrevocable trust that we're going to use is designed to protect you and ultimately your heirs. So who do we choose as a trustee? Oftentimes it's a very, your most trusted child, or sometimes the children serve jointly, or a sibling or a friend, and I've even seen accountants and attorneys serve this role. But I always encourage, if you got a trustworthy child, let's use them. I mean, because really it's their future inheritance. So, and they're going to do it for free and not charge you anything. All right. So the way that it works is we put the assets in there. If it's your home or real estate, which is a very simple thing to do, we're just creating a deed to the trust. We record the deed. Now the trust owns the real estate. And after 60 months, that's no longer an available asset. Now, what happens is, like any other trust, upon your death, your beneficiaries who you designated in your trust will inherit whatever assets are owned by the trust. So in the scenario that, we hope that doesn't play out, but if it did, again, better to have a plan and not need it than to need it and not have it, right? So we've got let's say that we have your home, maybe some vacant land, maybe some accounts that you're not going to spend in the irrevocable trust. Outside of the trust, this is typically going to be your retirement accounts and some other money that this is what you're going to live off of the rest of your life. And then let's say tragedy occurs and you have a stroke and you're in a nursing home for 5 years. During that 5-year period, we're going to use these other assets to pay for your care for as long as possible. Might be a month, might be a year, it just kind of depends. By the way, at that time, we would take a second look and see if there's some strategies we could use at that time to protect this money, but for the sake of this illustration, the money outside of the irrevocable trust is what you use as a private pay until you run out. And if you run out, then we apply for Medicaid, and Medicaid will pay for your care for the rest of your life. And then upon your death, whatever is in the trust will pass to your children or heirs, however you've designated. Okay, so you put the assets into the trust, you're the grantor. And then your trusted confidant is the trustee, and they manage the assets while they're in the trust. And then upon your death, the assets exit the trust and they go to your beneficiaries. And that's kind of the mechanics of the trust. Now, an important thing to understand here is once you have an asset in the trust, it can be changed. And what do I mean by that? So let's say you put your house into this irrevocable trust, and 2 years later you want to move or downsize or whatever reason, you just want to sell the house that's owned by the trust. Can you do that? And the answer is sure. So you yourself are not going to assign the paperwork, the trustee is, but you can replace the assets in the trust as often as you want. So if you have your Montana home in the trust, you can sell that. You can move to Florida or wherever and buy a Florida home and put it in the trust. It does not disrupt your 5-year look-back period. So you can do that as many times as you want. It's just when that happens, your trustee has to be the one that signs the buy-sell agreements or whatever at the closing. And they can do that remotely at a title company. So once the assets are in there, you still have full authority to manage that. But the way that it works, and that must work, is that the trustee signs, the trustee controls the assets inside the trust, but you control the trustee. What do I mean? You maintain the right to fire the trustee if the trustee malfunctions. So if your daughter is the trustee and you say, sell my house, leave the cash in the trust, but give me $50,000 because I want to travel the world. And the daughter who is serving as trustee says, no, Mom, I don't want to do that. That's my future inheritance. Then you call me and we replace her with someone who will do what you say. And you can also threaten your daughter that you can disinherit her. And so you yourself do not maintain the right to amend the trust. Why? Because it's irrevocable. But we build inside this trust what we call a trust protector clause. Trust protector clause is the legal way that you can change it. Okay? You can't do it yourself. You have to hire an attorney to do it, but it's a very simple process. It costs maybe a couple $100, but you can change the trustee. You can change some other things regarding the trust. So you maintain ultimate control of the trust. We can explore this more in detail at our visit. Look forward to seeing you there. But understand this irrevocable trust we're talking about, this Family Asset Protection Trust, it's a very, very different animal than most irrevocable trusts. This trust has been designed based on the Medicaid application. Okay? So we're taking all the information on a Medicaid application that we may be asked at some point in the future, and we're incorporating that language into the trust so it will pass muster. A lot of trusts, and you'll hear this, a lot of trusts won't work. Well, not all trusts are the same. So it's important to talk to someone who knows the difference between a tax-based irrevocable trust and a Medicaid-compliant irrevocable trust. Look forward to explaining that into more detail at the meeting. Thank you.